The silver moon hung cold and empty in the dark sky. No wind moved across the rocky ground. No sounds came from the deep caves that dotted the landscape. Even the hardy grass that usually grew between the stones had turned brown and died. Grix stood on the high ridge and looked down at the empty valley below. His silver fur, once thick and shining, now hung loose on his 8-foot frame. His yellow eyes, sharp as laser beams, saw everything but found nothing. The great predator's stomach, twisted with hunger that had lasted too many days to count. Behind him, 3 other Vorthak waited in silence. Vex crouched low, her nose pressed to the ground as she searched for any scent trail. Her claws, each as long as a human hand, scratched uselessly at the bare rock. Nox paced back and forth, his massive head turning left and right as he listened, for any sound of prey. Young Zek sat still, but his tail twitched with nervous energy. They were the last pack on this moon. The others had left weeks ago, following rumors of better hunting on distant worlds. But Grix had been born here. His father had ruled these lands and his father before him. The pack leader would not abandon their ancient territory, even as it slowly died around them. Nothing, Vex whispered, her voice like gravel in her throat. The scent trails are old, very old. Grix nodded but said nothing. He already knew. The herds that once moved across these plains had vanished. The flying creatures that nested in the cliff walls had not returned this season. Even the small burrowing animals that lived underground had gone silent. The Vorthak were known across the galaxy as the perfect hunters. They could track prey across entire star systems. Their teeth could bite through metal. Their claws could cut through stone. Other species told stories of Vorthak packs that could hunt down and kill anything that lived. But you cannot hunt what is not there. Nox stopped pacing and looked at his pack leader. Maybe we should follow the others, he said, quietly. Find new hunting grounds. This is our home, Grix replied, his voice firm despite his weakness. We do not run. Zek stood up slowly. The youngest of the pack was barely past his coming-of-age trials. He had never known true hunger before these past weeks. How long can we last without food? He asked. Grix did not answer. He did not want to tell the young hunter that they might have only days left. The Vorthak were strong, but even they had limits. Without food, their legendary strength would fade. Their sharp minds would grow cloudy. Eventually, they would become too weak to hunt even if prey returned. Vex raised her head suddenly. Her ears, tall and pointed, turned toward the southern valley. I hear something, she said. The pack went still. All 4 predators focused their enhanced senses toward the sound. It was faint but steady. A low humming noise like machinery. Ship, Nox said, landing in the far valley. Grix felt a spark of hope. Ships meant travelers. Travelers could be prey. He had never hunted the species that flew between stars, but desperate times called for new choices. We investigate, he decided. Stay low, stay quiet. The pack moved like shadows across the rocky ground. Even weakened by hunger, they still possessed the grace that made them feared throughout the galaxy. Their large paws made no sound on the stone. Their breathing stayed controlled and even. In the darkness between the 2 moons, they were nearly invisible. It took them an hour to reach the southern valley. They climbed to a new ridge that overlooked the landing site. Below them sat a small research vessel. It was white and clean, with strange symbols painted on its side. Next to it, a single figure moved around slowly, setting up equipment. The creature was small, barely half the height of the shortest Vorthak. It walked on 2 legs and had no visible claws or fangs. Its skin was covered in some kind of artificial hide that looked soft and weak. Most strange of all, it seemed completely unaware that 4 apex predators watched from above. What is it? Zek whispered. Some kind of explorer, Vex replied. I can smell it from here. No fear scent. It does not know we are here. Grix studied the small being below. It moved with purpose, carefully placing instruments around the landing area. Sometimes it would stop and look at a small device in its hand. Other times it would kneel down and dig small holes in the ground with simple tools. It looks weak, Nox observed. Easy prey. The pack leader continued watching. The small creature worked steadily, showing no signs of the nervous behavior that prey usually displayed in dangerous territory. Either it was very brave or very foolish. "It has food," Vex said suddenly. She pointed with one claw toward the creature's ship. "I can smell preserved meat, and other things." Grix's stomach cramped with hunger at the mention of food. It had been 5 days since their last small meal, a sickly rodent they had found dying near the caves. 4 adult Vorthak needed much more than that to survive. The small creature below moved to a flat rock and sat down. It reached into a container and pulled out something that gave off a rich, complex smell. Food. Real food. The scent drifted up to the ridge, making all 4 predators' mouths water. "We could take it," Zek said, his young voice eager. "Rush down, now. It would not even see us coming." Grix nodded slowly. It would be simple. The creature showed no weapons, no defenses. A quick strike and their hunger would be ended. They could search the ship for more supplies, but something made him hesitate. The way the small being sat so calmly in the open. The way it moved without fear in a place where fear should rule. In all his years as a hunter, Grix had never seen prey behave this way. "We wait," he decided. "Watch. Learn what it does." Vex looked at him with surprise. "Grix, we are starving. Why wait?" The pack leader's yellow eyes never left the small creature. "Below?" "Because," he said quietly, "something about this one is different, and different things require different hunting." So the 4 Vorthak settled onto the ridge to watch. Below them, the small alien continued its work, completely unaware that its next few actions would change the fate of 2 entire species. The hunt had begun, but neither predator nor prey knew yet how it would end. Park Hyun wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at his equipment readings. The soil samples showed good mineral content, but the atmospheric readings were strange. This moon should have more life than what he was seeing. He had been working on the surface for 3 hours now. His grandmother always told him to eat regular meals even when busy with work. Hyun smiled at the memory and reached for his lunch container. Kim Soo had packed it carefully before he left Earth, filling it with rice, seasoned vegetables, and protein bars. As Hyun opened the container, he noticed movement on the ridge above. He had good eyes from years of field work, and he could see 4 large shapes watching him. At first he thought they might be rocks or equipment left by previous surveys. But then one of them moved. They were animals, very large animals. Hyun had grown up in the mountains of Korea, where his family taught him about wildlife. His grandfather had been a forest ranger who understood animal behavior. From him, Hyun learned to read the signs of hunger, fear, and aggression in wild creatures. These animals on the ridge showed clear signs of hunger. The way they held their heads low, the way their bodies seemed smaller than they should be, the way they moved slowly, saving energy. Hyun had seen the same behavior in wolves during hard winters, but there was something else. These creatures were watching him with intelligence. Their positioning was too organized to be random. They were thinking, planning. This meant they were not just hungry animals. They were smart, hungry animals. Any reasonable person would have run back to their ship and locked the doors. But Hyun was not most people. He had spent his childhood helping his grandfather feed wild animals during harsh seasons. He understood that hunger made all creatures desperate, but it also made them willing to accept help. Hyun looked at his lunch, then back at the ridge. The creatures were still there, still watching. He could see them more clearly now. They were huge, with silver fur and yellow eyes that caught the moonlight. They looked like nothing he had ever seen before, but their body language was universal. They were starving. Hyun made a decision that would change everything. Instead of running, he began taking portions of his food out of the container. He placed small amounts on flat stones around his work area, creating a wide circle. The rice went on one stone, the vegetables on another. He broke the protein bars into pieces and spread them on several more stones. When he finished, Hyun walked back to his equipment and continued working. He made sure to move slowly and calmly. No sudden motions, no threatening gestures. Just a man doing his job while sharing his meal with hungry neighbors. On the ridge above, the four Vorthaks stared in complete shock. "What is it doing?" Zek whispered, his young voice full of confusion. "I do not understand," Vex replied. She had hunted for 20 years across a dozen worlds. Never had she seen prey behave this way. Nox's nose twitched as he caught the scent of the offered food. His stomach cramped, with desperate hunger. "It smells good," he said. "Real food, not the old scraps we have been finding." Grix said nothing. His yellow eyes studied the small creature below. It had seen them. It knew they were there. But instead of running or hiding or calling for help, it had given them food. This went against every natural law the pack leader understood. It could be a trap, Vex suggested. Maybe the food is poisoned. Maybe, Grix agreed. But his nose told him the food was clean, fresh, safe, and his stomach told him they might not have another chance to eat for days. "What do we do?" Nox asked. Grix made his choice. "We go down. Carefully. One at a time. If this is a trap, only one of us dies." The pack leader started down the ridge first. His massive paws found quiet paths between the rocks. Even weakened by hunger, he moved with the deadly grace that made Vorthak feared across the galaxy. But now that grace served a different purpose. He did not want to frighten the small creature that had offered them food. Hyun heard the soft sound of movement behind him. He did not turn around. His grandfather had taught him that sudden movements could startle wild animals into attacking. Instead, he kept working with his instruments, letting the creatures approach at their own pace. Grix reached the bottom of the ridge and paused. The small alien was less than 50 meters away, close enough to reach in 3 quick bounds. Close, enough to kill before it could even scream. But the creature continued its work, showing no fear. The pack leader approached the nearest stone with food on it. The scent was overwhelming. His mouth filled with saliva. His weakened body shook with need. But he forced himself to move slowly. He picked up a piece of the protein bar and tasted it carefully. The flavor was strange but good, rich, nutritious, real food after days of empty bellies. Grix ate the entire piece, then moved to the next stone. Seeing their leader feeding safely, the other 3 Vorthak came down from the ridge. They spread out among the stones, each finding their own portions. For several minutes, the only sounds were the quiet noises of desperate creatures finally getting the nourishment they needed. Hyun glanced up occasionally, watching the 4 magnificent predators eat his lunch. They were even more impressive up close. Each one was easily twice his size, with powerful muscles visible beneath their thick fur. Their claws could probably tear through his environmental suit like paper. Their teeth could bite through steel. But they ate carefully, almost politely. They did not fight over the food or try to take more than their share. They did not threaten him or demand more. They simply accepted what he had given and seemed grateful for it. When the food was gone, the 4 creatures did not leave. Instead, they settled down nearby, watching Hyun work. Their yellow eyes followed his movements, but there was no hunger in those gazes now. Only curiosity. Grix studied the small alien who had done the impossible. In all the stories passed down, through generations of Vorthak, no prey species had ever offered food to predators. It went against every instinct, every natural law. Prey ran from predators. Predators hunted prey. That was the way of the universe. But this small creature had changed the rules, and somehow Grix sensed that everything was about to change because of it. The pack settled in to watch and wait. They did not yet understand what had happened, but they knew it was important. They knew it was the beginning of something new. And deep in their ancient predator hearts, they felt something they had never experienced before. Something that had no word in their language. They felt gratitude. 3 days had passed since the first feeding. Every morning, Park Hyun would sit on his usual rock and share his breakfast with the 4 massive predators. Every evening, they would watch him eat dinner from a respectful distance. The routine had become as natural as breathing. High above the moon in the orbital research station, Dr. Yoon Jae stared at his monitor screens with disbelief. The automated sensors had been recording everything. Video feeds showed a human sitting calmly, while 4 Vorthak rested nearby. The implications were staggering. "This cannot be real," he muttered, adjusting his glasses for the 10th time that morning. Dr. Yoon had studied xenobiology for 15 years. He knew the reputation of the Vorthak. They were classified as one of the most dangerous predator species in known space. Most civilized worlds had shoot-on-sight orders for any Vorthak vessel, but the evidence was right there on his screens. 4 apex predators sharing space with a human. No violence, no hunting behavior. Just peaceful coexistence. Dr. Yoon activated his communication system and sent an urgent message to Earth. Within hours, that message reached Ambassador Lee Hana at the Galactic Council headquarters. She read the report 3 times before she believed it. "Get me a direct line to the research station," she ordered her assistant. "I need to speak with this Dr. Yoon immediately." On the moon's surface, Hyun was beginning to understand his new companions better. The largest one, who seemed to be their leader, had started bringing him gifts. Strange crystals that caught the light in beautiful ways. Rare metals that his equipment identified as extremely valuable. The great predator would place these offerings near Hyun's camp each morning, then retreat to watch his reaction. Hyun always accepted the gifts graciously, storing them carefully in his ship. He began leaving small tokens in return. Tools he had made, drawings of the landscape. Once he even played music from his personal device, watching as the 4 creatures tilted their massive heads to listen to the unfamiliar sounds. The second largest predator had taken on the role of clearing Hyun's work areas. Each morning, Hyun would find that dangerous rocks had been moved aside. Sharp metal debris had been cleared away. The path to his ship had been smoothed and made safe. The creature never showed itself during these helpful activities. But Hyun always left extra food as thanks. The third member of the group seemed to be some kind of scout or tracker. This one would position itself on high ground and watch the horizon. Whenever storms approached, it would make low warning sounds that Hyun learned to recognize. When the winds grew strong, the creature would use its massive body to block the worst of the weather from Hyun's equipment. The youngest of the 4 was the most curious. It would creep closer than the others, watching Hyun work with bright, intelligent eyes. Sometimes it would try to mimic Hyun's actions, using its claws to dig small holes or arrange rocks in patterns. The attempts were clumsy, but showed clear intelligence and a desire to help. Back on the research station, Dr. Yoon had established regular communication with Earth and the Galactic Council. Scientists and diplomats from a dozen worlds were demanding information about this unprecedented situation. "The behavioral changes are remarkable," Dr. Yoon reported during his daily briefing. "The Vorthak are demonstrating cooperation, tool use, and what can only be described as emotional attachment. These are traits we never believed they possessed." Ambassador Lee Hana listened to the reports with growing excitement and concern. Excitement because this could change everything about human-alien relations. Concern because not everyone in the galaxy would be happy about this development. "Doctor," she said during one conversation, "I need you to understand how dangerous this situation is. The Vorthak have been the common enemy that keeps many species united. If they can be befriended, if they can change, it will upset the balance of power across the galaxy." Dr. Yoon nodded grimly. He had been thinking the same thing. "What should I tell the human on the surface?" "Nothing yet," Ambassador Lee replied. "Let this develop naturally. But start recording everything. We will need proof of what is happening here." On the moon, Hyun was facing a growing problem. His food supplies were running low. The mission was supposed to last only a week, but he had been sharing his meals for 3 days. At this rate, he would run out of food before his pickup ship arrived. But looking at his 4 companions, Hyun could not bring himself to stop sharing. They were still too thin, still showed signs of the hunger that had nearly killed them. He made the decision to give them larger portions of his remaining food, even though it meant he would have less for himself. Grix noticed the human's increasing weakness. The small creature moved more slowly now. Its scent had changed, carrying the sharp smell of hunger that the pack leader knew well. The human was starving itself to keep feeding them. This realization hit Grix like a physical blow. In all his years as a predator, he had taken life to sustain his own. It was the natural order. The strong consumed the weak. But this weak creature was giving its own life to keep the strong alive. It made no sense according to any natural law. Grix understood. That evening, Grix made a decision that would have shocked any other Vorthak in the galaxy. He would hunt for the human. The pack leader gathered his 3 companions and explained his plan in their growling language. They would venture beyond their territory, into the deep caves where some creatures might still hide. They would hunt not for themselves, but for the small alien who had shown them kindness. This goes against everything we are, Vex protested. We do not hunt for other species. We hunt for ourselves. This human is not another species, Grix replied. It has fed us, protected us, shared its resources when it had little to spare. By the old codes of our people, that makes it pack. The other 3 stared at their leader in amazement. Pack bonds were sacred to the Vorthak. They were formed only between members of the same species, and only after great trials and shared hardships. To extend pack status to an alien was unthinkable, but they had all felt it. The strange warmth that came from the human's presence. The sense of belonging and safety they experienced when it was near. If that was not pack bonding, it was something close enough to make no difference. We hunt, Nox agreed finally. For our packmate. The 4 Vorthak ventured into territories they had avoided for weeks. Using their enhanced senses and desperate determination, they tracked down several small creatures that had been hiding in the deepest caves. It was not much, but it was fresh meat, food that could keep the human alive. They brought their kills back to the human's camp and laid them carefully near the ship. But then they faced a new problem. The human could not eat raw meat like they could. Its teeth were too small, its stomach too weak. They watched in dismay as Hyun examined their offering but could not consume it. Grix studied the human's equipment and behavior. He had observed how it prepared its own food, heating it with strange devices. Cautiously, the pack leader approached one of the human's cooking tools. Using his claws with surprising delicacy, he managed to activate the heating element. It took several attempts, but eventually, the 4 Vorthak learned to cook meat in ways their human packmate could eat. They watched proudly as Hyun consumed their offering, gaining strength from food they had provided. That night, as Hyun slept in his ship, the 4 predators settled in a protective circle around the landing site. They took turns standing watch, guarding their strange new packmate from any dangers the night might bring. Miles above them, Dr. Yoon recorded everything with growing wonder. The galaxy was about to learn that evolution and instinct could be overcome by something much more powerful. The galaxy was about to learn about friendship. 2 weeks had passed since the first shared meal. Park Hyun's official mission was supposed to end in 3 days, but everything had changed. His daily reports to the orbital station had become something much more important than geological surveys. Each morning brought new discoveries about his 4 companions. The pack leader, whom Hyun had started calling Grix in his personal notes, had learned to operate several pieces of human equipment. Not perfectly, but well enough to be helpful. The great predator could now activate heating elements, adjust lighting systems, and even work simple communication devices. Vex, the female scout, had appointed herself as Hyun's personal weather forecaster. She could sense approaching storms hours before human instruments detected them. Her warnings had saved his equipment from damage several times. In return, Hyun had crafted a simple shelter near his ship where she could rest during the day. Nox, the tracker, had become fascinated by Hyun's geological work. The massive predator would watch intently as Hyun took soil samples and recorded measurements. Sometimes Nox would bring interesting rocks or crystals he had found, dropping them carefully near Hyun's work area like a student eager to help with a project. Young Zek had proven to have an unexpected talent for problem-solving. When Hyun's primary drilling equipment broke down, Zek had watched the repair process with intense interest. The next day, when a secondary tool malfunctioned, Zek had actually helped fix it, using his claws like precision instruments to reach places human fingers could not access. But the most remarkable change was in their hunting behavior. The pack no longer hunted only for survival. They hunted to provide for their human packmate. Every few days they would venture into the deep territories and return with fresh meat, carefully prepared according to human dietary needs. Dr. Yoon Jae had been monitoring these developments with growing excitement and concern. His daily reports to Earth and the Galactic Council were creating waves of shock throughout civilized space. The behavioral modifications are unprecedented, he reported to Ambassador Lee Hana during their morning briefing. These Vorthak are demonstrating advanced learning capabilities, tool use, and genuine emotional attachment to a member of another species. We are witnessing the birth of the first truly interspecies pack bond in recorded history. Ambassador Lee stared at the video feeds showing Hyun working peacefully alongside 4 of the galaxy's most feared predators. Doctor, I need you to understand something. Word of this is spreading beyond official channels. There are species in the Galactic Council who have built their entire military strategy around the Vorthak being universally hostile. This discovery threatens their political power. What are you saying? Dr. Yoon asked, though he feared he already knew. I am saying that not everyone wants this friendship to succeed. We have intercepted communications suggesting that certain factions are preparing to take action. On the moon's surface, Yoon was unaware of the political storms brewing in orbit. He was focused on a more immediate problem. His scheduled pickup was still 3 days away, but his communication equipment had been damaged in the last storm. He had no way to contact the orbital station or request an early extraction. More importantly, he was not sure he wanted to leave. These 4 magnificent creatures had become more than research subjects or even friends. They felt like family. The thought of abandoning them to return to his old life filled him with unexpected sadness. Grix sensed his human packmate's emotional distress. The pack leader had learned to read Hyun's moods and body language as well as he could read those of his own species. Something was troubling the small alien, and Grix was determined to help. That evening, as they shared their usual dinner, Grix made a decision that would have shocked his ancestors. He began to speak, not in the growling language of his people, but in carefully practiced human words that he had learned by listening to Hyun's equipment and personal recordings. The sounds were rough and difficult for his throat to produce, but they were recognizable. Hyun, Grix said, his voice like gravel mixed with honey. Friend. Pack. Hyun nearly dropped his food container in surprise. He stared at the massive predator, hardly believing what he had heard. You can talk? Hyun asked softly. Learn, Grix replied with difficulty. Listen. Hyun teach. Pack, learn. It was the beginning of real communication between them. Over the next 2 days, all 4 Vorthak began attempting to use human words. Their pronunciation was rough and their vocabulary limited, but the intent was clear. They wanted to talk with their human packmate. Hyun found himself staying up late, into the night, teaching them basic words and phrases. In return, they began teaching him simple concepts in their own language. The exchange was clumsy and often frustrating, but it created a bond deeper than anything either species had experienced before. On the morning of Hyun's last scheduled day, disaster struck. Captain Choi Min had been monitoring the situation from his patrol cruiser in the outer system. As commander of a small military vessel, he had been ordered to maintain surveillance on the unprecedented contact between human and Vorthak. His reports had been forwarded to Fleet Command, where they caused considerable alarm. Captain, his communication officer reported, we have multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace, unknown configuration. They are not broadcasting identification signals. Captain Choi studied his tactical display with growing concern. 6 heavy cruisers had appeared at the edge of the system. Their design was unfamiliar, but their weapon signatures were unmistakable. These were warships, armed for serious combat. Sir, his sensor operator called out, I am detecting hegemony energy signatures. These are reptilian Dominion vessels. Captain Choi felt his blood run cold. The reptilian Dominion was one of the most aggressive members of the Hegemony Alliance. They had built their military doctrine around the principle that Vorthak were irredeemably hostile and must be destroyed wherever they were found. "They are moving toward the moon," his navigator reported. "Combat formation, weapons charging." On the surface, Hyun was teaching Zek the human word for friend when Grix suddenly went rigid. The pack leader's enhanced senses had detected something that human instruments could not yet perceive. "Danger," Grix growled, using one of his newly learned words. "Sky danger. Many ships." The other three Vorthak immediately took alert positions, their predator instincts recognizing the tone of absolute threat in their leader's voice. They formed a protective circle around Hyun, facing outward toward potential enemies. Hyun activated his emergency communication system, hoping to contact Dr. Yoon Jae on the orbital station. Static filled the channels. Someone was jamming all frequencies. High above them, the hegemony fleet moved into attack formation. Commander Vask of the Reptilian Dominion studied the surface scans with cold satisfaction. The reports had been accurate. One human surrounded by 4 Vorthak predators, an infection that threatened the stability of galactic politics. All ships. Commander Vask broadcast to his fleet. "Prepare for orbital bombardment. Target the landing site. We will eliminate this contamination before it can spread." But Commander Vask had made one crucial mistake. He had assumed the Vorthak on the surface were typical members of their species, savage predators driven only by hunger and aggression. He had not considered what Vorthak might become when they had something precious to protect. As the first energy beams lanced down from orbit, Grix did something that no Vorthak had ever done in their species' long history. He did not attack the source of the threat. He did not flee to save himself. Instead, he shielded his human packmate with his own body, absorbing the killing energy meant for someone he had learned to love. The war for the future of galactic civilization had begun, and it would be decided not by the strongest weapons or the most advanced technology, but by the power of friendship between two very different species. The first energy beam struck the ground just meters from where Hyun crouched behind his equipment. The impact sent rocks and debris flying in all directions. Through the chaos and smoke, he saw Grix stagger but remain standing, his silver fur singed black along one side. "Grix!" Hyun shouted, reaching toward his wounded friend. The massive predator turned his yellow eyes toward Hyun. Despite the pain, there was no fear in that gaze, only determination. "Pack safe!" Grix growled in his broken human speech. Grix protect pack. Above them, 6 hegemony warships moved into bombardment formation. Commander Vask watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The first strike had been a warning shot, meant to drive the targets into the open. Now he would finish them with one coordinated attack. "All weapons target the landing site," he ordered. "Full power, leave nothing alive." But as the ships prepared to fire, something unexpected happened. Captain Choi Min's patrol cruiser dropped out of hyperspace directly between the hegemony fleet and the moon. "This is Captain Choi of the Earth Defense Force," he broadcast on all frequencies. "You are firing on a human research mission in violation of galactic law. Cease your attack immediately." Commander Vask studied the lone human ship with amusement. It was barely 1/10 the size of his smallest cruiser. "Human captain, you have 1 minute to withdraw before we destroy you along with the contamination on the surface." "I will not withdraw," Captain Choi replied. His crew looked at him with a mixture of fear and pride. They were badly outnumbered, but they would not abandon their fellow humans. On the moon's surface, the 4 Vorthak had spread into a defensive formation around Hyun and his ship. They could not fight enemy vessels in orbit, but they could protect their packmate from ground-based attacks. Their predator instincts had evolved for exactly this kind of situation. Bex positioned herself on the high ground, using her enhanced senses to track the movement of ships overhead. When she detected targeting lasers painting the ground near Hyun, she would call out warnings in the mix of Vorthak and human words they had developed. Nox had taken control of Hyun's mining equipment, using his claws to modify the drilling tools into improvised weapons. The massive predator's intelligence and tool use abilities had grown remarkably during his time with Hyun. Now he was applying those skills to warfare. Young Zek had appointed himself as Hyun's personal bodyguard. The youngest pack member stayed, close to the human, ready to use his own body as a shield if necessary. His loyalty to his strange packmate was absolute. Grix coordinated their defense with the tactical brilliance that had made Vorthak feared across the galaxy. But now that intelligence served a new purpose. Instead of hunting prey, he was protecting family. The next energy barrage came from 3 ships simultaneously. The beams struck the ground in a triangle pattern, meant to trap the targets in a killing zone. But the Vorthak had anticipated this. They moved with inhuman speed and coordination, carrying Hyun and his equipment to safety just before the beams converged. Commander Vask snarled with frustration. The surface targets were moving too fast and too intelligently. These were not the savage beasts he had expected. They were thinking, planning, adapting. It was exactly what he had feared would happen if Vorthak learned to cooperate with other species. "Prepare landing shuttles," he ordered. "We will finish this on the ground." As the hegemony prepared their ground assault, Captain Choi made a desperate decision. His single ship could not fight 6 cruisers, but it could provide one crucial service. He opened his communication channels and began broadcasting everything that was happening on emergency frequencies. "This is Captain Choi Min to all vessels in range," he transmitted. "The hegemony is conducting an unprovoked attack on a peaceful research mission. Human and Vorthak are fighting together to defend innocent lives. The galaxy needs to see this." Dr. Yoon Jae, monitoring from his orbital station, immediately began recording and rebroadcasting the signal. Within minutes, the images were spreading across space to 100 worlds. For the first time in galactic history, beings everywhere could see Vorthak and human working together, fighting together, protecting each other. The political implications were staggering. Ambassador Lee Hanna, watching from Earth, knew that everything was about to change. The hegemony's power had always depended on fear of the Vorthak. If that fear disappeared, their entire alliance would collapse. On the moon, the first hegemony shuttles began landing. Reptilian soldiers in heavy armor poured out, weapons ready. They expected to face 4 savage beasts and 1 terrified human. Instead, they found themselves confronting a coordinated defensive force that fought with both predator instincts and intelligent strategy. Grix had learned much from watching Hyun's equipment and studying human tactical databases. He knew how to create ambush points, how to use terrain for cover, how to coordinate attacks for maximum effect. The other 3 Vorthak followed his lead with the perfect cooperation that only pack bonds could create. The battle was fierce but brief. The reptilian soldiers were tough and well-armed, but they were not prepared for enemies who combined Vorthak physical abilities with human tactical thinking. Within an hour, the landing force was in full retreat. But the victory came at a terrible cost. During the heaviest fighting, Hyun had seen Zek surrounded by enemy soldiers. Without thinking, the human had run forward to help his young friend, putting himself directly in the line of fire. The plasma blast that was meant for Zek struck Hyun instead. The human fell to the rocky ground, his environmental suit breached, his body broken by energy never meant to touch human flesh. Grix reached Hyun first, but the other 3 were close behind. They formed a protective circle around their fallen packmate, their massive bodies shielding him from further harm. For the first time in their species' history, Vorthak wept. The sound carried across every communication channel in the system. The galaxy heard the grief of predators who had learned to love. It was a sound that would haunt the dreams of those who heard it and change the hearts of those who understood its meaning. Commander Vask, monitoring the battle from orbit, felt something he had not expected. Doubt. The creatures on the surface were not the monsters he had been taught to fear. They were grieving for their fallen friend with an emotion deeper than anything he had ever witnessed. But orders were orders, and political necessity was stronger than sympathy. He prepared to finish what he had started, to eliminate the evidence of what the galaxy had seen. High above, Captain Choi watched his tactical display with growing hope. New contacts were appearing at the edge of the system. Ships from a dozen, different worlds, drawn by his emergency broadcast. They had come to witness history in the making. The war for the soul of galactic civilization was far from over. But for the first time, The hegemony was not fighting a few isolated victims. They were fighting the future itself. Park Hyun drifted between consciousness and darkness for 3 days. The medical bay of the Earth rescue ship was filled with the most advanced healing technology humanity possessed, but the plasma wounds were severe. His body fought for every breath while his mind wandered through strange dreams of silver fur and yellow eyes. In those dreams, he could hear voices, deep rumbling sounds that somehow carried words of comfort and encouragement. When he finally opened his eyes, he realized the voices were real. Grick stood slowly, his massive frame towering over the assembled diplomats. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of thousands of years of Vorthak history. Vorthak always hunt alone, always kill to live. But Hyun teach new way. Hyun show that strong can help weak. Weak can help strong. This make all more strong together. The pack leader's yellow eyes swept across the room, meeting the gaze of each delegate. Hyun save Pack when Pack was dying. Pack save Hyun when Hyun was dying. This is true Pack law. This is why galaxy change. Over the following months, Hyun recovered fully from his injuries. But he never returned to his old life as a simple terraforming engineer. Instead, he became something unprecedented. The first human Vorthak cultural liaison. The small moon where everything began was transformed into the new Pack research station. Scientists from across the galaxy came to study the remarkable changes happening there. But more importantly, it became a place where different species could learn to work together. Hyun and his 4 companions established the first interspecies colony. Young Vorthak, who had grown up hearing stories of the human packmate, came to learn new ways of living. Human volunteers arrived to help build a society based on cooperation rather than competition. The colony grew rapidly. Within 2 years, it hosted representatives from 47 different species. Former enemies worked side by side on projects that benefited everyone. The Vorthak hunting instincts were channeled into protection and exploration rather than killing. Human innovation was enhanced by alien perspectives and abilities. Zek, now fully grown, became the colony's head of security. His loyalty to Hyun had evolved into a dedication to protecting all peaceful beings. He trained mixed species security, teams that used both Vorthak physical abilities and human tactical thinking. Bex established the colony's early warning system, using her enhanced senses to monitor space traffic and weather patterns. Her predictions saved countless lives and helped coordinate the complex logistics of the growing settlement. Knox became the chief mining supervisor, applying his tracking skills to locate valuable resources while ensuring minimal environmental damage. His teams discovered rare elements that made the colony financially self-sufficient within 3 years. Grix took on the role of colony administrator, using his natural leadership abilities to coordinate between different species and cultures. His transformation from lone predator to community leader became a model studied throughout the galaxy. But the most remarkable change was in the children. Human and Vorthak young played together as naturally as breathing. They created their own mixed language, combining words from both cultures. They developed games that used the strengths of both species. Most importantly, they grew up seeing cooperation as normal rather than extraordinary. 5 years after the first shared meal, Dr. Songhai published her comprehensive study of the new pack phenomenon. Her research showed that the changes were spreading throughout the galaxy. Species that had maintained hostile relationships for millennia were beginning to explore peaceful contact. The hegemony still existed, but its power was broken. Without the universal fear of Vorthak predators to unite them, member species began pursuing their own interests. Some joined the growing coalition of cooperative worlds. Others retreated into isolation. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Hyun stood in the colony's central plaza with his 4 original packmates. Around them, the settlement bustled with activity. Humans and Vorthak worked together on construction projects. Alien children played in carefully tended gardens. The air filled with the sounds of a dozen languages mixing together in peaceful conversation. The monument they had erected was simple but powerful. A circle of stones surrounded a small table, exactly like the arrangement where Hyun had first shared his food. The inscription was written in 15 different languages, but the message was the same in all of them. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to share rather than take. Below that, in smaller text, was the story of how it all began. How a human terraforming engineer had shared his lunch with 4 starving predators, and how that simple act of kindness had changed the fate of the galaxy. Tourists came from across known space to see the monument and hear the story. Many species sent their young to study at the colony, learning the principles of cooperation that had transformed galactic civilization. But for Hyun, the most meaningful moments came in the evenings, when work was done and the colony settled into quiet routine. He would sit with Grix, Vex, Nox, and Zek, sharing simple meals and talking about the day's events. They were no longer just human and Vorthak. They were family. The pack that had once been starving now fed hope to an entire galaxy, and the human who had shared his lunch had discovered his true calling, proving that understanding and compassion could bridge any gap, no matter how vast or seemingly impossible. In the end, the greatest lesson was the simplest one. When someone is hungry, you share your food. When someone is in danger, you offer protection. When someone is alone, you become their family. The galaxy had learned that strength comes not from what you can take, but from what you are willing to give. And sometimes, the smallest gestures create the largest changes. The new pack had shown the way forward. Now it was up to the rest of the galaxy to follow. Sat beside his medical bed, speaking softly in the mix of human and Vorthak language they had developed. "Yun wake," the massive predator said, his scarred face showing relief. "Pack safe. Yun safe. All safe now." Through the medical bay window, Yun could see an impossible sight. Dozens of ships from across the galaxy surrounded the small moon. Human vessels flew alongside Vorthak hunting craft. Alien ships that had never shared the same space before moved in coordinated formations. Dr. Song Hai, the Galactic Council's chief anthropologist, entered the medical bay with obvious excitement. She carried recording equipment and data tablets, but her expression was one of pure wonder. "Mr. Park," she said, bowing respectfully, "you have changed the galaxy. Do you understand what has happened?" Hyun tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his chest. Grix immediately moved to help support him, the predator's massive claws surprisingly gentle as they adjusted the human's position. "I shared my lunch," Hyun said simply. "That is all." Dr. Song smiled. "That simple act has destroyed an alliance, built on fear and created something the galaxy has never seen before. When the hegemony attacked, they expected the rest of the galaxy to support them, or at least remain neutral. Instead, ships came from 100 worlds to defend you and your friends." She activated a holographic display showing the space around the moon. The tactical formation was incredible. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together. The hegemony fleet had been forced to withdraw, faced with overwhelming opposition from an improvised alliance of former enemies. "Commander, Vask and his ships jumped to hyperspace 6 hours ago," Dr. Song continued. "The reptilian dominion has been expelled from the Galactic Council. 3 other hegemony members have already applied for readmission under new terms." Grix listened to the conversation with growing understanding. His grasp of human language had improved dramatically during the crisis. "Pack grow big," he observed. "Many species. All pack now." The observation was more accurate than the great predator realized. What had started as one human sharing food with 4 hungry aliens had become a catalyst for galactic change. The images of Vorthak and humans fighting together, protecting each other, grieving for each other, had spread to every inhabited world. Ambassador Lee Hana arrived the next day, accompanied by representatives from 24 species. The diplomatic meeting took place in the ship's largest conference room, with Hyun still weak but determined to participate. The 4 Vorthak sat alongside the human delegation, no longer as curiosities but as equal participants. The Galactic Council formally recognizes the Vorthak as a fully sentient species with all rights and protections under galactic law, Ambassador Lee announced. "Furthermore, we officially acknowledge the first interspecies pack bond in recorded history." Grix,